Good evening to all our YouTube subscribers. We've had a few questions recently about a little bit of history of the J&L 58 and the Youngstown Steel Heritage Museum. So I thought I'd put together this little video to give you some background as to who we are, what we're doing, and a little bit on the history of the locomotive. This is the steel mill in Pittsburgh that the J&L 58 and its sisters called home. As you can see in the top of the photograph, that's downtown Pittsburgh, Monongahela River snaking its way around. You see a bridge coming in from the right-hand side. That's the hot metal bridge. The Monongahela Connecting Railroad came across from the blast furnace plant on the other side of the river. And just above where the bridge comes across, you'll see an open hearth plant. That is pretty much where the 23-inch gauge operation was centered. Most of it was basically handling the scrap going into the open hearth and then handling the ingots and ingot molds coming out of the open hearth. And then as you go to the left a little bit, some of the older buildings also had 23-inch gauge trackage. As far as I know, there was no narrow gauge south of where the Moncon came across the river. That new open hearth down on the left-hand side, all that was all standard gauge. This is a photograph looking across the river towards the South Side Works with the Eliza blast furnaces in the foreground, and then you can see the hot metal bridge again. And then back there in the distance, the old open hearth plant on the right, and then the newer one on the left. More than likely, the J&L 58 is somewhere in that cluster of buildings across the river. Now, there are a few old photographs that survive of the Southside Works, and you can see some of the narrow gauge trackage there. In that upper photograph, you can see the difference between the 2-foot and the standard gauge. And then we have a group of workers standing on the track, and then the group on the right-hand side of that bottom left photograph, you can see they're standing on a little narrow gauge car. And a few other photographs. A military delegation paid a visit to the plants, walking over the narrow gauge trackage. Bottom left is when there was a machine shop fire, and that one railroad track running through there, that is 23-inch gauge. Apparently, they just quickly laid that track down through there to help him in cleaning up the damage from the fire and rebuilding. And then the lower right photograph, you can see below where it says crane number 1, you can see that one little track right there kind of goes straight and then veers to the left. That's 23-inch gauge, and that was one of the teaming platforms in the open hearth. So yeah, we do have that photograph there, but it's very hard to find any pictures of Southside Works and the narrow gauge in there, or any photos of that in that plant whatsoever. This map kind of shows some of the extent of the narrow gauge operations. You see the Moncon hot metal bridge coming in from the upper right, coming across. The building at the top of the map is the old open hearth plant, and then you can see all the narrow gauge trackage just kind of snakes its way in between the buildings, going through buildings, coming out. There's a location there where it looks like a track comes out of the building, makes a 180-degree turn, goes right back into the building. So you can only imagine that there was just tracks everywhere, and these locomotives were just moving anything and everything around in this part of the plant. And obviously from the wear that we found on that locomotive, after only been in operation for about 20 years or so, I mean, there was just some areas, especially where the drawbars would slide back and forth. Steel was wore down, almost an inch. Well, obviously that was because of going through all these curves and tight curves, moving cars around. So here we've got a few photos of some of the earlier locomotives. This is J&L number 7. It was built by Porter, and I think I've kind of figured out that there was something along the line of 43 narrow gauge locomotives that we came up with a roster of, mainly from Porter records and from records from other historians. So this would have been the first number 7. And here's number 9, and you can see some of the design characteristics carried through into the later locomotives, especially how there's that side opening in the cab and the way that cab side is built. This also is a Porter product. This is J&L number 4, built by Pittsburgh Locomotive Works. Obviously not a Porter, but still built in Pittsburgh. What's interesting here? Well, this photograph showed up on eBay, and this is the image that I screenshotted from the listing. I did buy the original, so we have the original of this in the collection now. There were very few locomotives built by Pittsburgh Locomotive Works for J&L. Most of them were Porters. The vast majority were Porters. But this, this also shows you have the whistle up there in the right-hand corner. Notice no headlight. I doubt it has a bell on it. None of the locomotives I knew of had much in the way of headlights and bells, electrical systems, or anything like that. Just pretty basic. It's hard to tell if this one here even has brakes on it. Here's second number 7. Very good builder's photo. Of this one. This here, of course, is a Porter, and it shows you can kind of tell as the design evolved over the years, they kept some of the design characteristics from the earlier locomotives. Then in the 1920s, there was a couple of these ones built, and these weighed 60,000 pounds, and at the time there was an article written about these locomotives, and in the article they were kind of astounded of the immense weight of these 60,000 pound locomotives at J&L Southside Works, and how heavy these are, and nobody's ever built anything heavy like this before. Well, then the next order that came out of Porter, they were 93,000 pounds, so they were a third again heavier than these. I wonder what they would have thought had they saw those. And which then brings us to this last group, the last 7 locomotives. It started with number 57 through number 63. And very few photographs that we've found of these locomotives in operation. And here are 3 of them. And then there is the builder's photo. So there's like 4 photographs of these locomotives actually in operation that we have found. It's interesting that 2 of the photos here shows the locomotives popping a safety valve, so I've got a feeling that these things are very easy steamers. Okay, go into the preservation of locomotives. When I first learned about these J&L locomotives was at this location here. That is not me in the photograph. This is a picture given to me by a friend of somebody else that visited these locomotives. 57 and 58, 58 and 59 were at Bencart Rigging in Cranberry, PA. And if you go down the Pennsylvania Turnpike and just east of the Cranberry exit, there is a rigging company on the south side of the highway. They've got yellow cranes and a bunch of other equipment in a very small lot. They were sitting there for years. And that's where I saw them. And this was in the mid-90s when I found them. I was down there with a friend of mine, and we talked with John Bencart, and I wanted to buy 58 back then, but rather young, didn't have any money, didn't really have anywhere to put it. This was before we acquired the museum site, so ultimately I did not make a purchase. While we were there, though, we were looking at the 59, you noticed that there was a large freeze crack in one of the cast iron cylinders. Back behind the cylinder board, there's a kind of a pocket. It must have filled with water and expanded and froze. Well, when John Bencart found out about that, he was adamant. Oh, we're going to scrap that one because nobody's going to want to buy that one. And he was so cramped for space there, he wanted to get rid of them. He wanted them out of there. So he was going to cut it up. So we made a deal with him that my friend bought the boiler, and then we went and took the running gear apart and salvaged a lot of parts off of it. I took a bunch of parts back home with me, and I've had them squirreled away for years. Other parts stayed down there, and the boiler eventually made its way to California and is available for sale, and we're actually going to buy it and bring it back here to Youngstown at some point. As the when 58 was sold later to a fellow by the name of Jerry Harlow, and he lived out west of Pittsburgh, and Bencart moved it out to his house, his farm, and Jerry got all the spare parts that went along with the locomotive. That basically, when 59 was scrapped, the only thing they scrapped was the frame and the cab and the cylinders. Everything else pretty much was saved. All those extra parts are saved. So Jerry got the locomotive, got the extra parts that Bencart had, and took it out to his farm, and he was going to build a track and run the locomotive around, but that didn't happen, and he eventually sold it to Jonas Stutzman, and then it was moved up to Middlefield. And then when it arrived up in Middlefield, this is what it looked like there, and it still had its front pilot, still had the cab and the rear platform and everything on there. At that time, Jonas cut all of that extra metal off, with the basically thinking that this thing is so heavy that nobody's going to want to buy this locomotive from him if it weighs 93,000 pounds. So he removed all that extra metal, but really, once you start tearing into it in the frame and all that, once you take that extra steel off of there, it really throws the balance of it off, and there's just so much weight in the frame that it's hard to try to make it into a lighter built locomotive. They were just specially built to be extremely heavy, and it's going to be very hard to make it any lighter than that. So that's when I kind of entered the picture. Well, Jonas has sold the locomotive to Pete Jedlicka, who has American Industrial Mining, is a good friend of mine, and he was going to restore it, but I made a deal with Pete to purchase it off of him, and because, after I had seen it at Bencart's, I didn't know what happened to him. I didn't know if Bencart had scrapped him or scrapped the 58 or what had happened to it until I saw it in a photograph up at Stutzman's shop. And so I didn't know where it was at or if it was still around. Well, once I found it, it was still in existence. That's when I said, well, I definitely would like to have a second chance at getting this locomotive and to restore it. So purchased it, and this was, I think, December 30th of 2015. We went up there and picked it up, loaded it on a trailer, hauled it down to Youngstown, and here in this photograph, I'm there on the left. In the middle is Rich Reese, who's one of our board members, and on the right-hand side is Nick Hovey, another one of our good volunteers here. And as soon as it got here, I started dismantling the locomotive, taking all the valve gear parts and the side rods off, taking all the components off of it, stripping it down. It took quite a bit of work to get the wheel sets freed up. As you can see, it's kind of up on blocks, and the front wheels are off the ground because I think I had a something welded up on the other side to try to force that wheel to turn. It turned out that there's nothing wrong with the roller bearings, that there is a pretty close clearance between the wheel and the box in one location. Inside the driver box, there's kind of a grease seal. Well, instead of being grease in that seal, it was rusted up. So we just had to break the rust free. And here it is. I'm pulling it around the tight 40-foot radius bend back to where we're building the engine house. The 40-foot radius bend is curve here is kind of a not ideal, but it was the only thing I could do in order to make the bend, because our property is in an L shape. I think we're going to have a lot of fun trying to get the locomotive around the curve. There'll be a lot of jostling and the thing will kind of waddle its way around the curve, but I don't see any reason why it won't go. We're thinking of adding some sort of a lubrication system to help it around the curve. Kind of what we're thinking about is just dribbling water out of the water tank onto the drivers as it goes around the curve. So we use water to reduce the friction, and then and since it's water, it evaporates, and we're not using oil and we're getting grease all over the rails everywhere else. So anyways, when I got the locomotive off of Jonas, I didn't know that the drivers for 59 still existed, or that the water tank still existed. When Jonas got the locomotive, he didn't want that stuff that was at Jerry Harlow's place, and so I didn't know that they existed, because they were still left down there in PA. Well, just about the same time, Jerry had passed away, and his brother was cleaning up the property, and somebody that knew the brother was on the internet and saw my postings about this project, this locomotive, and the guy contacted me, and he told me that these components still existed at the farm. So I made arrangements to go down there and get them. So went down there and rented a telehandler and drove back into the woods there and cut the trees out from around the tank and the drivers and picked it up and hauled them out. So we were very lucky that we were able to find them, because I really didn't even know what the tank looked like. And we're going to try to recreate it somehow. Well, one of the things we did recreate, since we could not find the original, was the builder's plate, and this started out as a aluminum reproduction from a builder's plate for a Porter 3-foot gauge fireless locomotive that J.R. May owned. And so he gave me one of the reproductions that he made off of that builder's plate. I took it, ground that number off, bought the 4 pattern numbers, glued them in place, turned it into a mold, made the sand mold, and then we poured it in bronze at the Carey furnaces down in Swissvale, PA, and then cleaned it up into what you see there in the middle. Now let's talk a little bit about Youngstown Steel Heritage, and this is the organization that I founded initially back in the early 1990s, and our goal is to preserve the steel industry heritage of the Mahoning Valley in Ohio and Shenango Valley in Pennsylvania, and then over the years we've kind of enlarged ourselves, where we kind of cover everything from Cleveland to Pittsburgh to some extent. Our main goal is to create a steel industry museum in Youngstown, where we have actual pieces of steel making equipment on display, and trying to make it into a living history museum. I don't really care all that much for museums where everything is stuffed and mounted and behind glass. They have their place, but I like machinery, so I want to see things run and operate, and that's kind of what I'm trying to create here. The first thing that we started working on back in 1995 was this, and I was 22 years old at the time, and we got this rolling mill steam engine out of one of the steel mills in Youngstown. This engine is called the Tod Engine. It weighs about 260 tons, It's 4,000 horsepower, and drove a rolling mill for Youngstown Sheet and Tube. And this photo was taken in 2014, just after we got done doing the cosmetic restoration for its 100th birthday. This is the thing that occupies most of the space in our main building. What the overhead crane above it is something that, I mean, we built this building in 2009, and I wanted an overhead crane for the for this building, and so I found that crane about 5 miles away in Majory, and the owner of the shop there was actually going to cut it down for scrap, and so he donated it instead, and I had to figure out how to tear down an overhead crane and get it out of the building safely, and did, and then we had to build this building designed for it. It turned out that crane was built in 1893 by Morgan Engineering, and then doing more research found out that it is most likely the oldest existing electric overhead crane in the country. Had no idea when we first got it of anything about its history, but later on we found out, so, oh, this was built in 1893. And the first electric overhead crane was built in 1888, and we couldn't find anywhere or any of the earlier cranes before this still exist. So, we're making a claim that is the oldest electric overhead crane in the country, and built by Morgan and Alliance, and it's Mahoning Valley, so it's significant to our valley, anyways. Well, there's a picture of the Tod Engine crankshaft as it was coming over from North Star Steel a few years ago. That's a 50-ton crankshaft right there. And another exhibit we have out back is our hot metal train. That is a GE 70-ton center cab, originally built for New York Central, and it was used by New York Central for about 10 years, and then it went to Standard Slag and worked slag plants for several more decades, and then went to Valley Mold and Iron and Hubbard in the early 80s. It and its and a twin, two of them, went to Valley Mold, and this one was used mainly for moving the hot metal cars from the melt shop over to the foundry. The hot metal car there is a Kling type car, which was built in Youngstown, and the inventor, Fred Kling, was also an engineer for Carnegie Steel Ohio Works. So that locomotive has quite a bit of significance locally. And this was a later addition from last year. This is a Pennsylvania Railroad ore shunter that was used up at Whiskey Island at the ore docks, built by Baldwin in 1912. And here's the picture of it while it was still in service in Cleveland. You can see the 4 Hewletts in the background. There's the fantail of an ore boat. This shunter, after the ore docks closed, it went to the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania. It was there for about 16 years. Then they deaccessioned it and donated it to us, and we moved it to Youngstown last year, and have since put a coat of paint on it, made the lights work, did a few other little repairs, and eventually we will make it operable on its own, under its own power. And all of that culminates into this. This is the aerial view of our property, of the Youngstown Steel Heritage Museum. We're kind of in an L shape as our property. It's only 1.2 acres. The large building there, that's the Tod Engine building. Just to the south of that, you can see the small engine house and our 40-foot radius curve, and then behind, to the right of that, is the hot metal train. So the way the track's going to lay out is that we're going to start at the very front corner of the property, and when visitors come in, you park in our front parking lot. Just you can walk right over and get on the train. We'll have the locomotive down there with a rider car, and you get on the train there. And then we shove you it's kind of uphill a little bit up to where the engine house is, shove you up the hill. You actually go through the engine house, around the tight curve there, and then back to the north end of the property. And then once all the track's in, you'll also have this switchback, which will take you a bit higher up to the top and the very back corner of the property. And then from there, the visitors can get off the train, and then they can walk around outside looking at all the exhibits, and then go into the Tod Engine building, look at the Tod Engine, our exhibits inside, and then finally exit and then walk back out to their car. So what we're trying to do here with the museum is trying to make this look as close as possible to what a steel mill or what an industrial plant would have if they had narrow gauge servicing their facility. So, I mean, obviously we don't have room to put a loop of track. I don't really like loops of track anyways. You never saw those in industry. You know, but you would see something like this where you're moving cars around from one part of the property to the other because of space limitations. You have to have switchbacks or tight curves or tight switches, or you're going to have steep grades. So this is kind of a, you know, full-size switching layout. Now this track plan, you know, there may be other sidings and spurs and other tracks in here, or this may, you know, end up being built a little bit differently. This is all kind of fluid right now. Initially, what we're trying to do is, well, we have the curve done. We're working our way to the north end of property with that initial track, and then we're going to go to the, you know, to the very front of the property. So it'll be that L-shaped initially, and then we'll put the switch back in later. But you know, when you come to Youngstown Steel Heritage, you know, you come in here, you'll get on the Ryder car, and then we'll take you by train up through this kind of, you know, industrial landscape where you can see pieces of railroad equipment and steel making equipment there on display. I think it'll be a very unique attraction. I don't know anybody else doing anything like this, especially focusing on steel industry, and certainly not doing it with a couple of people that are doing it on a shoestring budget. You know, we don't have any, you know, big foundation support behind us. You know, we're not tied into any government money or anything like that. This is just, you know, a half dozen of us passionate about this sort of thing and trying to do what we can to build a rather interesting museum. So, you know, when we're looking for contributions or asking for patrons on the YouTube channel and asking for all that, I mean, every dime that we make goes into this project to make this a reality. And you know, and we do everything we can to raise money to try to keep this going, because it's very important that this does succeed. So at any rate, thanks everybody for listening to me as I drone on about this. I very much appreciate everybody's support for this project, and I work on this thing all the time and put everything I have into it, and a few of the others that we have also put quite a bit of time into this as well. And you know, we're looking at 2018 to be a very big year for us for the museum. We're gonna have a locomotive running. We're gonna have enough track in so we can actually run the train around. And be the beginnings of that, you know, getting everything tied in together so that we can get this museum going and open to the public on a regular basis. So again, thank you for your support, and there will be many more videos coming very soon. Thanks.